And I feel like there's an issue too with like that kind of mentality, like the support group mentality where everyone's like kind of coddling you and comforting you.
Hmm.
And like there's like a fine line between when someone needs support and when you're actually enabling bad behavior. So um
That's right.
I have like when I was younger, I got diagnosed with endometriosis, like pretty rough. Like I actually had to have surgery to get it like
Hmm.
removed because it was debilitating. And then I ended up getting Graves' disease shortly after, and it went a really long time without getting diagnosed. So I got really, really ill. So I didn't really know what was happening with me. I once I got my diagnosis, I joined a couple of like these Facebook groups just to like see what other people were going through. And so
Hmm.
quickly I just saw like all of this like self-loathing and I like just complaining. And I can say this because I've like firsthand gone through it. It sucks. It's painful. There are like shitty side effects of medications and all of these things. But if you live in this negative space and you just perpetuate each other's like misery, you're never going to get out of it. You're never going to heal. So I like quickly left all of those things. I ended up doing a bunch of work, and most of my stuff is like in really great shape right now. But if I had stayed there, I would have been like, this is normal, right? And this is how I fit into this group. So I think discomfort is super important. And again, it's not to fat shame or yell at someone and make them feel like shit, but like I think it means something if you can't fit in a seat, right? Like that should tell you something. Like your health is in
Yeah.
danger. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the
No,
intentions are
that's
probably good,
exactly
but it's
right.
short-sighted.
No, you're right. The enablement is the exact parallel. It's, people want to accuse the self esteem culture or whatever. Maybe that's a thing, all this self esteem based education. Um, but the truth is that there is a difference. Like, and nobody's confused about it if it's somebody who's like an alcoholic or if there's somebody who's using drugs and it's destroying their lives. We all understand that there's a difference between supporting that person and enabling the
Mhm.
problem.
Mhm.
The same thing occurs in a bajillion different categories of life. We can talk about it very easily with, this obesity kind of thing. You can talk about it with other health issues like you've just brought up. We could also talk about it with, cultural approaches to what do you think about education? What do you think are the right values to have in society? What do their enablement happens everywhere. And this is where when you hear people criticize stuff like the race policy that people are trying to pass using, whether it's Black Lives Matter or whatever as the push, that they say it's the soft bigotry of low expectations, that you're coddling, you're saying that black people aren't as capable. And so you have to give them a lower and different standard, for example. And they say, well, that's technically racist against black people. And it is. It's at some level, and I think that there's a fine line here, but at some level, you're no longer helping. You are enabling and perpetuating and deepening a problem. I remember my friend when it was in the military, and he told me that when he was, this was back in the day, as they say, he's an older guy now. When they had an affirmative action program in his Marine Corps unit. And the way that it worked was anybody could go. It wasn't like, oh, only black people or only Hispanics or whatever can come to this. Anybody can go. Anybody who needs more help, but the standard doesn't change. If you want to get through your PT test, you still have to pass the PT test exactly as it is. But we'll dump resources into helping you get over the standard that doesn't change. And I thought, man, that's just so obviously the difference between helping and enabling, right? It's so obviously the difference
Mhm.
that when you don't compromise on the standard, but then offer extra support to help somebody get over the hump, that's clearly helping. But then if you say, oh, we'll just make it easier for you, you don't have to
Mhm.
do as much. That's something very different. And obviously, when you have a thing like the military where units are going to get killed if people aren't functioning at a high level, and everybody in the unit's not functioning at a high level, you can't compromise on the standards. So when you
Mhm.
have places where you can't compromise on standards, it becomes much more clear how important it is to use a helping model versus an enabling model. So like where we see people saying, "Oh, it's racist. The SAT is racist, so we have to get rid of it." Why? Well, because some people have more SAT tutoring than others, and those people, they argue, those people, by the way, have something in common. It's called money, which turns out not to have a race. I
Mhm.
look at my money, and it's all green-ish. That they've made them peach and purple and bluish and things now, but it's all the same to
Mhm.
everybody. $100 in your hand, $100 in my hand. The fact that you're a woman and I'm a guy, that we have very different ethnic backgrounds, matters zero.
Mhm.
So it's not even race. But anyway, they say, oh, well, there are statistical differences in how much money people have, and that must be where the racism is. So they've hidden the racism a step back. Well, that's fine. Anybody under a certain income level or anybody who even wants to, we're going to put money into free SAT prep or reduced cost SAT prep or whatever it is. So that's the helping, but the standard doesn't change. But then when you have this other mentality, like, let's get rid of the SAT entirely, that's something different. And
Mhm.
why would you want to do that? Because then there's no objective standard to let somebody get in. It's all a subjective standard. And when it becomes a subjective standard, you get to determine what subjective standards you want. This is, by the way, a lot of people don't know this. This is literally exactly the same thing that happened when Mao was taking over in China. He got rid of the standardized tests and made it party loyalty tests instead.
Oh, wow.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. And so yeah, a lot of people don't have any idea that's what happened there. So the difference between helping and enabling is the crux of everything that's happening with these debates, because
Mhm.
they do have there are points to what they're saying. Black Lives Matter isn't coming out and saying stuff that's just made up. Some of it's made up. Some of it's just completely crazy. If you read they took their website down, the part that was
Yeah, I
really
saw
crazy.
that.
But we're going to abolish the family and all of this crazy stuff, and we stand with our comrades, trans comrades or something like. It's like, whoa, comrades, okay. They're like, I see what's going on here.
Mhm.
But that said, there are points to what they're saying. There are disparities that are statistical, but they're also for reasons that were legitimate. Redlining happened, Jim Crow
Mhm.
happened, slavery happened.
Mhm.
These things happened. The Great Society, because it's not all right wing or racist or whatever. The Great Society happened, which was this gigantic program put in right after the Civil Rights Act in '64 by Johnson, by President Johnson. The Great Society was this huge enablement program. And so you see where help became enablement. And all of a sudden, in fact, you can hear people, the critics, if you read the critical race theory, they talk about it. And they're like, it stole our culture from us. We had a culture, even though it was bad under segregation. We had a culture, we had values, we had a core structure. And the Great Society created huge incentives, for example, to be a single mother with many children with no father.
Mhm.
It created all kinds of new problems, and they're not wrong to criticize those things. So progressive policy can fail. Racism is also a problem. They're not talking about stuff that's totally made up. And there are points there, but there's a difference between helping and enabling, and that's the essence of the argument. So I'm glad you brought that up.